Manx Radio's Update with Dave Moore.
The time is 5 o'clock. You're listening to Manx Radio. I am Dave Moore. This is Update. Welcome to the programme. Half an hour of the latest news in the Isle of Man, plus sport, business, travel updates, along with the newsmakers in person. Coming up, facial recognition software at the island's ports is moving a step closer. We'll hear from the Home Affairs Minister. As child benefit supports increase today, we'll also hear from the Treasury Minister. And what happened on the Manxman at the weekend when an alarm was sounded? That's all coming up in the next half hour. First of all, the update news headlines with Christian Jones. Faster my.
The Treasury Minister says the Isle of Man Medical Society has got the wrong end of the stick when it comes to plans for a new NHS levy. A public consultation is underway to gauge views on how much should be charged, with Treasury pointing out that health spending has risen by 14% annually over the past 5 years, outpacing economic growth. Firefighters say every second counts when responding to an emergency, as the fire service renews pleas for motorists to park considerately, ensuring there's enough space for engines to pass. It follows reports of an increasing number of issues which have led to delays responding to call-outs. The Manx agriculture sector is in a frightening position financially, according to a farmer in the north of the island. Robert Murray is calling for farmers to be paid a fair price for their produce and warns the export market isn't profitable. And resurfacing work on the A1 at Crosby Rise, west of Crosby Village, is taking longer than anticipated due to higher temperatures. The repaired lane is not expected to be ready for traffic until around 6 this evening. In the latest international news now, and the UK Prime Minister has announced a series of measures to protect the UK's car industry from America's new tariff regime. All car imports into the US are now subject to a 25% import levy. Sir Keir Starmer says manufacturing targets for electric vehicles will be eased to help makers cope with predicted losses. The PM is warning that the old economic order may be a thing of the past.
This is not a passing phase. This is a changing and completely new world, an era where old assumptions, which we've long taken for granted, simply don't apply any longer.
The King and Queen have arrived in Italy for a 4-day state visit. Their meeting with the Pope has been cancelled as he recovers from pneumonia. And a Paddington Bear statue that was partly ripped off its bench and stolen in Berkshire is due to return home. 2 RAF engineers admitted breaking the figure in half before stealing it in Newbury during a night out last month. Those are the updated news headlines. Next at 6.
Thank you, Christian. On to the weather. Continuing fine this evening, dry and clear overnight. Light winds, low temperatures tonight around 3 Celsius in places, but a little colder in some inland spots. A slight grass frost is likely. Then tomorrow, another fine sunny day. Light winds, maximum temperature of 13 Celsius, and remaining dry and settled for the rest of the week. But a change will then gradually occur later in the weekend and into next week.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
If you run a small business or just need more room in the back, Philshaw Vehicles has the perfect van or light commercial for all your needs and can sort out any finance. Based in the Tremode Estate, view philshawvehicles.im or call 49 51 49.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Bell-Dorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company, Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank.
SMS Trading have moved to 3 St Paul's Square, Ramsey. For flat pack to fully built, new or second-hand furniture, SMS Trading offer all-island delivery and man-in-a-van service. Call 315151 or find SMS Trading on Facebook.
At Begode Cattery, we have been caring for animals for over 50 years. As a cattery, we care for customers' cats and treat them as our own. Contact Begode Cattery on 676 947 or find Begode Cattery on Facebook.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
And we begin with the Home Affairs Minister saying a draft bill which will eventually enable the use of facial recognition software at the island's ports is expected to reach the branches of Tynwald by this summer. Jane Poole-Wilson's been giving evidence to the Constitutional and Legal Affairs and Justice Committee. One of the questions raised surrounded whether or not the use of such software is too invasive for the travelling public. But Chief Officer for the Department of Home Affairs, Dan Davis, says it would be proportionate given similar tech used elsewhere.
The use of facial recognition is in some ways less invasive in that it will immediately dispose of any images that aren't a match with a criminal image. So whilst it will look at every person passing through, the images are immediately discarded, and it's only when you have a match to a known criminal that that person is identified. So we think that it's about layers of security. One is identifying criminals coming through to the island who aren't known to us. There's also something around the use of intelligence to identify when there are criminal movements. And there is another layer which the constabulary are keen, and the department is keen to support the constabulary in using information that is gathered on exactly who is travelling. And the department's view is that if you travel by plane, in certain circumstances, you're required to provide information on who you are. It's very difficult, for example, to buy a ticket for cash to fly on a plane direct from the travel agent, and you have to provide the details of your name and address. If you're travelling to Europe, then you have to provide all of your details for onward transmission for the purposes of preventing and detecting crime and terrorism. So we think that putting it on a reasonably, on a similar basis would be proportionate.
You're listening to Manx Radio. This is Update. Smoke from a faulty fan unit sparked an evacuation of the bar and some passenger cabins and lounges on the Manxman on Saturday. The vessel was less than an hour out of Heysham when the alarm was sounded. The steam packet says the unit was isolated and there was no danger to passengers, crew or vessel. One passenger was Roy Hall, returning from the Lake District.
The captain announced all teams to stations 3 times. We were in the Arbor Lounge. We were ushered downstairs into the front cafe, and we were then told that all the fire doors had been closed and there was members of staff on the doors so that nobody could leave. They were extracting everyone from cabins and toilets and that, making sure everyone was up at the front of the ship. The captain did announce that there was smoke, and they didn't know it was an incident. They didn't know where it was coming from, and they were investigating it. So this was obviously safety protocol. And, you know, there was young mums there with babies that were actually quite upset. They then handed out bottles of water to everybody. And then after about 10, 15 minutes, they decided to move us back upstairs at the front of the ship into the Niarbal Lounge. And again, we had to stay there. They did keep the staff were excellent. You couldn't fault the staff whatsoever. They put us back into the Niarbal Lounge. They gave us sandwiches, biscuits, cakes, water, but nobody was allowed to leave for the entire journey back to the island. I was quite surprised that we just carried on going. I thought we would have turned around and gone back to Heysham, or at least waited outside Heysham, that if they did need to evacuate us from the ship, you know, the lifeboats wouldn't have had far to go to get us to dry land, but we just kept going.
You weren't conscious of the vessel slowing down at all?
No, because I actually have ship tracker on my phone, so occasionally I was having a look to see if we had, because sometimes it felt like that we'd slowed down or stopped, but I kept on checking on my app and it hadn't done.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
Appeal Commissioner standing for re-election says that solving the housing issue in the area is one of his top priorities for the town. Frank Compton, who's standing for a second time, hopes if elected he'll be able to see through some ongoing projects as well as finding a solution to Michael Street.
I think the reason that I've stood again is because I put my manifesto out the last time, and I was looking at it the other day, and there's about 80% of it has been achieved, albeit not as quick as I'd like it to have been done, but there are things changing. We've got things in the pipeline which I'm quite excited about, things to do with housing, possible new cafe down on the promenade, and also I'd like to see things within the retail appeal as well pick up a little bit better. I haven't got an answer for Michael Street, although I do hear some people talking about it. I know a lot of the traders, I know the difficulties they're going through, and at the moment I couldn't honestly say I've got an answer for that, but hopefully if I get in this time round, we can have a look at it again. My manifesto, funny enough, this time round, is going to be very similar to the last one, because all of my beliefs and the things that I want to go on and peel, because I've achieved a lot of it, not just by myself, with the board as well, there are things now moving forward which I'd like to just move a bit more. I'm not a big politician, but I'm just born and bred in Peel. Got Peel blood running through me. Got a lot of family in Peel. I've got a real passion to do with housing. I've struggled with things myself over the years, so I get other younger families now that are trying to get homes. Housing is my priority. I really want to see people living in affordable homes, houses fit to live in. I think Peel definitely needs to focus on inclusivity. Now, we've got the wheelchair for the beach, and we've put a little bit more decking down there so people in a wheelchair can get down. I think it's not really something the commissioners can do, but I'd like to see pavements sorted around Peel so people can get up and down them, because until you're in the likes of a wheelchair or you're not so good on your feet, you don't appreciate things like that.
Frank Compton. The other candidates standing for Peel Commissioners are Katrina Baptist, Alistair Cubban-Wood, Stuart Hardingham, Ray Harmer, Sharon Lambert, Christine Muckton and William Otieno Costain. If you receive child benefit support, you'll have seen your payments increased from today. In this year's budget, a 2.2% uplift was announced, as well as increases to income thresholds. Almost 5,800 families on the island currently receive this benefit, around two-thirds of which have a household income under £50,000. Treasury Minister Alex Allinson joined Sean Cowper live on Manx Radio Breakfast this morning.
So it will affect an awful lot of people. We think that the increase in the 2.2% is an additional £297,000. The threshold increase is an additional £1.2 million. And so it's really trying to put more money into the pockets of working families.
We know money is tight at the moment, though. Where are those funds coming from?
These are coming from our revenue. So they're not coming from the National Insurance Fund. This is be putting money in people's pockets through some of the economic growth we've seen, and really goes along with the Island Plan in terms of making this a great place to live and work, but also ties in with some of the other things that this administration's been doing, like the childcare strategy, like giving childcare credits to those 3 and 4 year olds as well as the 4 and 5 year olds.
Now, the 2.2% increase, we know the inflation rate is currently at 2.6. It's fluctuated a bit over the last year. Is this going to be making that much of a difference, or is this just increasing the benefit to match the rising cost of living?
It's a help. I agree with you that, we tend to upgrade our benefits in line with the September rate of inflation, as they do in the UK. Their rate of inflation was 1.7%. So their benefits have gone up by that. Ours was 2.2%. So ours have gone up a little bit more. It's an extra 60p a week for the average claimant who are on the full amount. But also, by changing the thresholds, we've actually put more money in people's pockets, with households who are earning £60,000 or £70,000 combined.
You touched on some of the additional support that's been put in place over the last year. We saw recently the figures on the birth rate on the island. It dropped again last year. Do you think there is still a lack of support for those who are looking to start a family?
I think when you look at working families, there are a huge amount of pressures there. We can do some good in terms of things like child benefit, things like the childcare strategy. But one of the big things that are affecting people are housing costs on the island and the availability of accessible housing. That's why a lot of things in the Island Plan are looking at housing, but why also we need to increase the minimum wage. We need to increase median earnings so people can afford to have a really good standard of living on the island.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, everything's looking good down at the airport. The departures to Liverpool, the Loganair is due to leave at 6:20. The EasyJet Gatwick is due to go at 7:10, and the Loganair flight to Edinburgh is also showing on time at 5:08. In terms of arrivals, it's also a good picture there as well. The next one in should be 6:10 Manchester from Loganair. The 6:10 EasyJet from Gatwick. The Loganair flight from Edinburgh at 7:25, 8:10 London City Loganair, and 8:15 the Liverpool Loganair flight is due in on time as well. In terms of the steam packet, there's a slightly different schedule today, but the Manannan is on its way to Liverpool as I speak. On the roads, resurfacing work on the A1 at Crosby Rise, west of Crosby Village, is taking longer than anticipated due to higher temperatures. The repaired lane is not expected to be ready for traffic until around 6 o'clock tonight. Manual traffic control is in place during this evening's rush hour to help manage delays. On the Manannan, it was delayed. Its departure from Douglas didn't leave until 4:15, and the return from Liverpool is also expected to leave around 8:15, which is an hour later than initially planned.
Quayside Tyres and Service Centre with 1 year's free engine warranty from Castrol. Get more with
The farming sector claims 95% of the food consumed in the Isle of Man is imported, meaning local producers are almost totally reliant on the export market. It's led to some in the industry saying they feel like second-class citizens and are worried about the next generation of farmers. Robert Morrie and Brian Brumby both run farms in the north of the island and have been speaking to Phil Gaughan.
I'm a firm believer, to be honest with you, that farmers even now should be paid a fair price for what they produce. They shouldn't need subsidy. There's enough money in the food chain for a farmer to have his fair share. And unfortunately, that is not happening. And you hear prices now on stuff, and they haven't gone up in 10, 15 years in the real world. Great, you talk about, obviously, I was a cereal farmer, and we were knocking around the £150 a tonne for grain 15 years ago. And, really, we should be looking at £300 or £400 a tonne now, and we're nowhere near that. And, yeah, it's frightening. I just really, really feel for the next generation of farmers that they're keen, they're really good at what they do, but they're really struggling, and we've got this global economy, and people just do not want to pay for food. And we, as an industry, can't carry on like that.
And of course, the thinking, Brian, was that once production support went, if people wanted farmers to produce food, they would have to pay a viable amount to the farmers to encourage the farmers to do that. So rather than government encouraging farmers, it was going to be done through the marketplace, effectively.
Yeah, and in a bigger, more connected environment, that works. But the problem with the Isle of Man, you could argue, in comparison to the UK, the farms are too small, which leads to inefficiencies. And then when you produced your product, 70% of what's produced by Manx farmers is exported, so it incurs the steam packet costs to export it. And 95% of the food eaten on the island is imported by the big supermarkets. So there's only a very small area where the Manx farmers can work and sell on an island, because to sell to one of the supermarkets, you've got to basically export to re-import through their system.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
The One World Centre charity will be out in Douglas this weekend collecting funds to help with the relief effort in Myanmar. The organisation's coordinator, Wendy Shimon, says every amount, no matter how big or small, will help the victims of the earthquake.
Whenever the Disasters Emergency Committee call an appeal for a disaster or some other horrendous event, we always help them out by running a street collection here on the Isle of Man to allow people here to easily donate to whatever disaster that is. So obviously the Myanmar earthquake happened about a week ago now. The appeal was set last Thursday. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too late to do it last weekend, but we are planning to collect for this weekend. So that's Friday the 11th, Saturday the 12th and Sunday the 13th of April.
And where will you be located?
That very much depends on the number of volunteers we get to help us. We'll definitely be in Douglas, both in the town centre and in Lake Road Tesco store. So thank you very much to them for allowing us to be there. And providing we get volunteers in some of the other towns, we might be able to extend it to other towns as well.
Are you setting any targets?
It's very difficult to set a target, particularly at the moment in the sort of financial climate that we're in. All I can say is that appeals vary from a couple of £1,000 to up to £20,000. Depending on what it is, how people feel about it. So it's impossible to set a target. But of course, every penny counts. We've got people in desperate situation over in Myanmar. So it really does make a difference, even if it's just a few quid.
And if someone isn't going to be in Douglas or wherever this weekend, can they donate online?
Yeah, sure. They can donate directly to the DEC. So the website is dec.org.uk. And then you choose the Myanmar earthquake appeal, because they still do have an appeal out for the Middle East as well. So make sure you select the one that you want to donate to. They also have a text mechanism. If you look at their website, they'll give you a text number where you can simply text £10 straight to the appeal. So there's lots of different ways that you can donate if you don't come across us with a bucket.
Finally, once you've collected the money, how does it work? Where does it go to? Who does it end up with?
Okay, so the Disasters Emergency Committee is a consortium of 15 of the big, very well-known charities. So you've got people like Oxfam, Save the Children, the British Red Cross. And at times of emergencies like this, they all work together rather than all trying to collect donations. They work under this umbrella organisation which collects the money centrally and then gives the money to whoever can do the best work on the ground at the time. So, for example, Oxfam had a project in Myanmar and they were able to get to people very quickly. They might give more money to them. So it gets shared between different agencies, but always the ones that can actually do the most on the ground at the time.
You're listening to Manx Radio. This is Update. Live footfall counters will be used in Douglas and town centres around the island to see if schemes designed to support local shops are making the high street busier. The multi-million-pound local economy strategy was approved earlier this year. Tim Cowsall, the Chief Executive of Business Isle of Man, has been speaking to Phil Gaughan.
Now that these schemes are going to be coming alive in the next month or so, businesses are working and communities are growing together and sort of saying, well, what can we do with this opportunity here to drive footfall to our town centres? And there's been a range of events recently that have really sort of highlighted that. So the moon that was in Peel Cathedral, that drew massive numbers into the town, which that isn't just people walking in. They've spent money in those local businesses and they've gone out and done that. So that footfall perspective is really key. So what can you do to try and drive footfall into these town centres? So our idea is to monitor that and understand what's going on. So we'll have live footfall counters that will be able to give an idea of the movement of those people and then see what works and what doesn't work. And that's really key when you start looking at some more, wider options in terms of trying to find opportunities to grow those numbers and support those businesses, because that spend comes into the town and it's used. So I think it's really key. Now we need to sit down with these businesses and communities to understand what can drive forward.
Whilst the core focus is going to be on the main sort of retail areas, this is not just limited to towns and villages, is it? If there are businesses that can increase footfall out in the sticks, they can potentially apply for some of the support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, our focus is around putting events and things into the town centre, because that's where the biggest output of an event or driving footfall. But yes, other areas can apply to that. And I think, there's the Town and Village Regeneration Scheme, is sort of an enhanced version, as the Minister said. We've got the Local Economy Fund, which is about community-driven investment into the town centres. So that's quite open as a scheme, and there's lots of options to do that. And then you've got the Core Domestic Event Fund, which is around events, and they can be anywhere. But our level of support will be more focused on a town centre first principle and a local business perspective. Those are the two areas that the strategy really calls from, and that's where our schemes will be focused at.
You can hear more on this topic on Agenda, which follows this programme. Organisers of a new exhibition celebrating the life and work of Archibald Knox say they're thrilled to feature more than 200 pieces from across the British Isles. The collection includes rare examples of silver, pewter and jewellery from some of the most iconic collections. Manx National Heritage describes guest speaker Dr. Stephen Martin as the world authority on Archibald Knox. Speaking at the launch event, he shared his thoughts.
Knox was a modernist with respect for the past, part of the broader movement between arts and crafts and Art Nouveau. Somebody was asking me today where I would locate him, and I would say Knox was not an arts and crafts designer in the sense of honest and clear craftsmanship. In fact, I'm not so sure how involved with craftsmanship he was. He was a great designer with a broad vision. And what he brought to the design process was an elegance of simplicity, sort of less is more in the best sense of the term. There are objects in some of these cabinets that could be designed tomorrow, and it takes your breath away, really. When I first encountered Knox's work in a used book, some 30, long time ago, my head exploded because I had never seen anything like it, and I wasn't asking for this. So I was grabbed and drawn and dragged, and here I am. His designs are great examples of avant-garde sparity when it comes to ornamentation. There is ornamentation. When you look at the objects, you see the entrelac designs, and sometimes he incorporates those into the structure of the object themselves. Great examples actually are the jewelry. So one of the questions I ask everybody is, what would you take home? And I would certainly take home some of the jewelry. That's three-dimensional calligraphy. That's what I think.
Sport now, here's Darren Timson.
Good evening. TT rider Dominic Herbertson has been snapped up by a new team a week after the shock cancellation by WTF Racing. The 34-year-old has been signed by Marlborough Racing, who will make their debut at this year's Isle of Man TT. Dom the Bomb had been due to compete for WTF alongside James Hillier. However, the outfit announced on April 1st they would be cancelling all of their plans for the year. This left both drivers without a seat with less than 2 months before the start of the event. Herbertson said, "I'm really looking forward to riding for Marlborough Racing in the Super Twin races this year." In cycling, Max Walker and Ben Swift both competed at the men's Ronde van Vlaanderen on Sunday. Swift finished the better of the two as the Ineos Grenadiers rider finished 108th. Unfortunately for Walker though, the Education Easy Post cyclist did not finish the race. The event also saw 2024 Tour de France champion Tadej Pogačar win the event. Elizabeth Holden also raced in Belgium on Sunday. The UAE Team ADQ rider competed in the women's Ronde van Vlaanderen. She finished 72nd. In rugby, there was a mixed end to the league campaigns for Douglas and Vagabonds on Saturday. Douglas ended the season strong with a 30-24 win to seal a highest league position of 6th. They beat the playoff contenders Furwood Waterloo in the Regional 2 North West. Meanwhile, Vagabonds lost to De La Salle in the County 3 ADM Lancashire Cheshire. Douglas and Vaggers will now face each other in the Manx Challenge Cup next weekend. And in hockey, Bacazet were crowned champions of the Men's Premier League. The side won the competition despite losing 3-1 to title rivals Vikings A due to a superior goal difference on the final day of the season. Elsewhere, Vikings B won the Men's Division 1.